Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, October 26, 2022, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan. On How the Frack We Got Here, we do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before we do get started, guys, we do try to let you know that even though this is a news podcast, we do try to watch our language. And sometimes there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers. So your discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So what do we get on this wonderful hump day so far? Well, we start off with the Supreme Court. Yeah, I know. Kind of a twist, isn't it? Judge Alito calls the leak of Supreme Court draft opinion overturning Roe versus Wade a grave betrayal that endangered some justices. Really? The leak of your draft opinion being exposed to the public about you suggesting to overturn Roe versus Wade is a betrayal that endangers some justices. For all those that don't remember, this is the, which feels like ages ago at this point. Earlier this year, there was a leak that was breaking news that that Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito's opinion of Roe versus Wade was leaked, and that it may have been considered the Supreme Court is considering to overturn the landmark case, which in that sense made abortion legal law of the land. So we all remember that leak. We all remember the fear. And then we remembered, oh crap, failure in chief Donald Trump pushed two Supreme Court justice picks through. He pushed through Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, both with less than questionable backgrounds, and yet conservatives ran them right on through. So at the time, the conservative-leaning Supreme Court was poised to do exactly what they would do just 4 months later, is strike down the landmark case of Roe versus Wade, and all those conservative-led states who had abortion and trigger laws into effect decided to make abortion illegal, or try to, at the same time, while forcing their opinion on everybody else. Why are we surprised? But it's amazing that he points out that he says, well, this leak caused some justices to be endangered. Really? Who? You? Kavanaugh? Who, Kavanaugh did have a man, threaten to kill him and actually try to find him at his home. You had protests outside of your home, which I admit may have been a little on the extreme side. Protest at the courthouse, sure. Protest outside of a Supreme Court justice's home, yeah, that's a little extreme. Even so, that how quickly Congress got protection put in place for them and their families tells you that there's nothing wrong with Congress. They just choose not to act when they want to. But I didn't see Sotomayor needing protection. I didn't need Stephen Meyer needing protection. Can't really count Ketanji Brown Jackson because she wasn't a part of the Supreme Court at the time. But I can only imagine her if she voted not to strike down Roe versus Wade. So if you want to be honest, he's crying about security, but these judges and their decision-making actually alter the country as we know it. So it amazes me so that these men and one woman saw no problem telling many of American women that your bodies do not matter, that your body is not your choice, and that abortion, we simply don't believe in it because for a lot of us, they believe that an unborn child deserves a voice, no matter how you look at it. But instead of just respecting everybody's way of life, they decide that they're going to make their way the law of the land. And now you have a Supreme Court justice who's saying that, well, that leak should never happen. I can only imagine, okay, let's say the leak never came out. Do you not think that the leak never came out? That in the days leading up to the Supreme Court making a ruling that we're still not going to know that you guys are literally thinking about turning down Roe versus Wade, putting it back down to where it was, setting back women hundreds of years? Did you not think that it would not have the same impact, if not more, considering the fact that of all the cases the Supreme Court needs to hear, that why is this one important? I'm sorry, Alito. You're a judge. You're automatically going to have security in most cases. Now, again, do I believe that, protesting outside of a courthouse is one thing. Protesting out of somebody's house where it's their domicile, that's a little extreme. I will be honest about that. I am all for protesting, but when you're protesting outside of somebody's house in that sense, that's a little too much. Now, again, take with it what you will, but saying that the leak is a breach of trust. No, the breach of trust was really turning down a law that benefited women only to satisfy a few repressed religious people. That's the true crime. But moving right along, guys. Unfortunately, we do have to cover the story as well, as there was another school shooting involving a former student, and this time, as of this podcast, there were 2 casualties.
But we do begin here with the discovery after that deadly school shooting that left a student and teacher dead. Authorities say the 19-year-old who just graduated, another young man with an AR-15 style rifle. The images of the teenagers running for their lives, their hands up in St. Louis. Police now say the 19-year-old who graduated last year had more than 600 rounds of ammunition. And tonight, the handwritten note he left behind. We are not going to report on its entirety, but the sheriff tonight on the line that was not only disturbing, but a wake-up call yet again. ABC's Alex Perez leading us off in St. Louis.
The chilling images playing out inside a St. Louis classroom terrified students running for their lives. And tonight, authorities have revealed the gunman was another young person. And they say this was the AR-15 style weapon he used to kill a teacher and a 10th grader.
He came into the building with more than 600 rounds of ammunition on his person.
The police chief today reading excerpts from a disturbing handwritten note 19-year-old Orlando Harris, who graduated from the school last year, left behind in his vehicle.
I've been an isolated loner my entire life. This was the perfect storm for a mass shooter.
The 19-year-old fatally wounded in a shootout with police. He had already killed a sophomore and varsity dance team member Alexandra Bell. Her family heartbroken.
What made her amazing was no matter how mad or frustrated you were, she could always make that frown turn into a smile. She could always brighten up your day.
The gunman also killing 61-year-old health teacher Jean Kushka. The cross-country coach was a mother of 5 and grandmother to 7.
She put herself between them and harm, between them and danger. She was love. She was the embodiment of love.
7 other students injured, 4 grazed by bullets, 1 with a broken ankle after jumping from the building to safety.
And David, authorities say they won't reveal how exactly the shooter entered the building for security reasons, but they do say it was not through an official entry point. Authorities are now also working to determine if the person who sold the gunman that rifle could face criminal charges. David?
So again, it's hard enough that we have to still report this, that the number of school shootings that have increased, this time in St. Louis. But can we please stop the fact that every time, and this is the news cycle, understandably so, but you're going to run into this issue to where as soon as there's a school shooting, yes, gun laws need to be talked about, gun regulation. Well, criminals aren't going to follow the law. That's usually the go-to response. Criminals don't follow laws. Here's the problem with the most recent school shootings that we've had. None of these weapons were illegally purchased weapons. None of them. They were all legal. I guarantee, as we look more into the St. Louis shooter, he himself will have purchased a gun, will have purchased his handgun, will purchase his firearm, this AR-style rifle. I guarantee it would have been legally purchased. The fact that he had 600 rounds of ammunition, again, I am all, like I said, I get the whole thing of stocking ammunition. I get it to a certain extent. And I say certain extent because unless you're an avid shooter or you're in competition or all the above, I don't see any reason to stock up that much ammo. 600 rounds of ammo and you're not falling under certain conditions, to me, should be a red flag. Even more so, this is why I keep saying the entire time, we need to be more vigilant about how, number one, these weapons are put out, number two, the people that are being sold these weapons, and number three, how they're being regulated. Again, red flag laws can stop a lot. Raising the age can stop a lot. Actually, if the person involved runs any type of trouble with the law, that a mental health screening is needed, or a psychological leave, or psych eval is needed, because we really need to take a look at how people are getting a hold of firearms this easily. Firearms and ammo. And again, this was in St. Louis. 2 lives were lost. And yet we're still asking the same question, what are we doing? Because if you have guys not noticed, yes, we do have a gun law in place that was signed by Biden about a month ago, but that does more to soothe conservatives than actually stop crime. Because again, universal background checks need to be needed. Private sales, I've said this before, private sales need to be handled differently. How we do gun and knife, because that's commercial sales. Commercial sales, like gun, knife, trade sales, don't do background checks. And I have yet for anybody to call me out on that. I'm from Tennessee, the literal home of gun and knife and trade shows that are done down here. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, go to a gun, knife, and trade show with money and ID, you will walk out with firearms. Why? Because no background checks are done. So again, it's not the fact that criminals are getting their hands on these weapons. It's the fact of the matter, we really need to take a look at who's getting their hands on these weapons. And the simple fact of the matter is how dangerous it is that they can actually do so, because we've seen the aftermath of when they have these weapons and ammo in their hands. The best way to prevent this is to finally have that hard conversation, to finally push through legislation that's actually going to get to work, and stop bending to the will of gun nuts and ammo sexuals. And this is coming from a gun owner. I love guns as much as the next person, but there needs to be legislation, regulation, new rules, and laws to put in place to protect, to deter, and to punish those who break that law. It's that freaking simple. That's all I'm saying. But guys, remember, guys, we are not too far off. Actually, we are nearing the end of October and going into November, which means midterm elections, especially if you're in Tennessee. And again, early voting has started. So if you want, go to your city's website. I know for Tennessee, it's tn.gov. You can go to early voting. You can see where they're actually doing the votes, and you yourself can go out there and vote. I highly, highly encourage it. Know the candidates, know what they're about, but please vote. Action is always welcome. No action is frowned upon. And if you don't want to early vote, but you want to wait for voting day, feel free. But if I were you, do like I'm doing, take advantage of this early vote and get on in and beat the crowds. Because unfortunately, since we don't have a election day as a national holiday, we're kind of hosed. But hey, do what you can. That being said, the reason why I bring that up is because you guys do remember, as we cover on this podcast, that only conservatives, and even some extreme conservatives are the main ones who are always talking about voter fraud. We have to protect the election. We have to make sure the ballots are in there. We have to make sure the right people get to vote. Yet conservatives are the only ones that are putting in new laws about voting, restricting mail-in voting, restricting where ballot boxes can be put, restricting what a poll worker can do, besides, making it a felony to give food or water to a person that's voting. Yes, all conservatives. That being said, the only time we ever hear about voter fraud or voter suppression always deals with conservatives. Don't believe me? This story. These two men right here, on the left, Jack Berman, on the right, Jacob Wohl, are pleading guilty to where they were caught in a 2020 election fraud. Those two gentlemen right there actually were a part of a voter suppression campaign back in 2020 using robocalls to keep certain people from voting. They were found out and they were arrested, and they're now pleading guilty, which probably means they did a deal. Keep in mind, this is always conservatives. No matter how you cut the mustard on this, it's always conservatives. I've yet to find Democrats. I've yet to find independents. I've yet to find Green Party. I have yet to find anyone else outside of conservatives were the same people talking about voter suppression, voter fraud and all this stuff are the same people that are doing voter suppression campaigns that are basically passing on election misinformation, passing along folks who can and cannot vote, doing everything they can to do voter suppression, right along with Roger DeSantis in Florida in his election police, which, by the way, are basically dissuading people from voting, even though Amendment 4 did allow some criminals their voting rights restored. That's all those states. But we just saw two people who are now being indicted for election fraud. Conservatives, they are the only ones out there that I know will always be the ones that talk about voter fraud. But one thing I will get about conservatives, conservatives will do everything they can to stoke the anger of the Mayo in order to get them to come out. Even more so is what current Arizona GOP candidate does, which, again, how they stoke the fire and reality, they're just like oil and water. They don't mix. Just listen to the story.
Gosh, you guys turned out today.
In the race for Arizona governor, you hear this from Republican nominee Kari Lake on her plan for border security.
It's called our Article 1, Section 10 rights under the United States Constitution. Article 1, Section 10, United States Constitution. We're going to invoke our Article 1, Section 10, basically authority to take care of our own border.
That border is an international border, so the federal government controls it. But Lake interprets the U.S. Constitution to mean she could do this.
As governor, I will issue a declaration of invasion, finish President Trump's wall, blow up the cartel's drug tunnels and surveillance drones, and deploy the Arizona National Guard to stop illegals from entering.
Those explosions and drones are computer-generated graphics to illustrate her point, something echoed by fellow Arizona Republican and U.S. Senate nominee Blake Masters, also using computer graphics in his ad.
This is an invasion. We know what to do. We need to finish Trump's wall.
Arizona State University law professor Angela Banks says the reason these nominees specifically use the word invasion,
by declaring that there has been an invasion, they believe that they would be able to exercise the federal powers that are articulated in Article 1, Section 10. However, the only specific power there that would be relevant for states to engage in would be the power to engage in war.
A minor detail that Lake skips on the campaign trail.
If you've been following me for even 1 second, you know that I'm going to declare an invasion on day 1, hour 1. I don't care if we have to fight the federal government and the fake news every step of the way.
That hardline stance is popular among the Republican base in Arizona, a border state that's seen the influx of migrants and drugs. Outgoing Republican Governor Doug Ducey moved more than 100 shipping containers to try and plug holes in the border over the summer, a move that's landed his action in court. And that's where Lake's constitutional plan would likely end up.
Is this more political rhetoric, or does this legally seem feasible to you?
So I think this is a lot of political rhetoric. And so I think what we're seeing is an effort to turn that rhetoric that's been used in the public discourse into something legally meaningful. And I think that is where there are significant questions as to whether that will be successful.
So what's crazy about this is, number one, the GOP candidate is doing what every conservative does. They follow Trump's playbook. They will incite the fact that there's an invasion when there really is not. We're a nation of immigrants. People are always going to come to the U.S. You didn't complain when the Russians came over here before they started beef with Ukraine. No one cried when Ukrainian refugees were coming here. But you know when they cried, though? They cried when those from Mexico and the lower parts of South America started coming here, because it is the Mayo's fear that sometime down the road, those people, those ethnic groups are going to outnumber them. It's amazing for people. It's amazing for a group of select few of Mayo people, not all white people, but for a select few of the Mayo people, the fear has always been that as their numbers dwindle, the other numbers increase. And if the other numbers increase, that means things will change. And it's amazing that when you've been on top for so long, that for some odd reason, it's scary to think that another race may do the same thing that possibly your race has done to other people. That's all I'm saying. Seems to be a little more of a fear than anything else. But going back to that GOP candidate for 1 second, they do what they've always done. Trump has laid out the playbook, stoke their fears, invoke their anger. We're going to build a wall. I don't know why walls are important. The border wall is about as useful as a wet noodle. Why? Because immigrants are not just hopping borders. They're not pulling a Narcos and going under tunnels. They're not, using the waterways and things of that nature. You know how most immigrants are getting here? Plane. Yeah, there's no border wall at the airport, I can tell you that much. But they're not jumping over the wall. And even though we've seen many YouTube videos out there show how ineffective this wall is, because folks have still been able to climb it and get over it and come right into the States. But it's amazing how so many people are so worried about immigrants, but at the same time, you don't want the jobs that they're doing. Amazing. But again, that's GOP candidates for you, because Trump has amassed this cult-like following, and they'll tap into it when it serves their benefits. Because they did the same thing on January 6th. They did the same thing days before that. They stoked that fire with Trump and then also try to hide in the same room with Democrats, because the mob didn't care who they came for, because they came for chaos, and chaos does not discriminate. But again, guys, as I said before, midterm elections are next month, and of course, early voting can happen in your state. So definitely check your state's website to find that out. I know for Tennessee's, it's going on right now. But there is one thing that is going to be talked about during these midterms, especially for voting. If you're going to be voting, especially voting either early voting or being in line, that senior citizens, baby boomers, because the baby boomer generation is starting to get up there, are also dealing with inflation. How they're dealing with inflation should say a lot, because actually out of the economy, besides children and education, it affects senior citizens the most.
At the Senior Friendship Center in Sarasota, Florida, ask about inflation. Will strike a chord with nearly everyone.
I've seen it as an excuse for people to take advantage of other people.
Nice hand.
Around the bridge table, these retirees are feeling the squeeze.
Everything is expensive.
81-year-old Catherine Janes turned to her son for financial help.
It makes things a little easier.
79-year-old Ron Longhurst cut back on evening socializing.
Your Barstool viewers may note that I'm taking maybe a week to two longer between haircuts.
And 82-year-old Ann Smith cut down on her favorite simple pleasure, drinking soda.
You're actually watching your Coca-Cola budget.
Yeah, it's tripled.
Seniors on a fixed income have been hit particularly hard by inflation, with September prices up 8.2% from a year ago. Even worse in areas like Tampa, Florida, where the housing market has exploded.
Everything is going up except our income.
67-year-old Sharon Johnson says her family's rent in Tampa jumped $350 this year to $3,100 a month. And with other bills surging, it's thrown their budget into chaos.
I've never had to worry about how we were going to eat.
They already have boxes packed, expecting another rent hike when their lease ends. The retired university counselor and her husband, a retired engineer and teacher, moved here from Michigan. But so far, price hikes are stealing their retirement dream.
We are middle income with less to work with than when we worked full time. And we have worked hard and we've been honest. Then why is it going in reverse?
Next year, Social Security recipients will receive an annual cost of living adjustment of 8.7%, the largest increase since 1981.
The salad smells good.
But for now, seniors like Barb Smith have felt little relief. The 70-year-old volunteers at a free restaurant, a modern-day soup kitchen for the less fortunate.
Thank you.
But she's come to rely on the take-home meal she gets after her shift.
I do have bills that have to be paid, and those have to be paid. And I have bought some groceries, but I ended up having to take it back because something else came up that was more important than what I bought. And sometimes I only eat one meal a day.
So that meal means a lot.
Yes.
She works as a caretaker, living without family. She stopped buying puzzles, her favorite hobby. The strain from these price hikes is isolating.
If it hasn't been for volunteering, I would probably be insane by now.
The same concern brings this group to their card game. With tighter budgets, they're finding joy in things that don't get more expensive.
When I go home on Thursdays, I'm a much happier person.
And many seniors have seen.
So let's think about this for a second. That's just senior citizens. Now, I admit there's going to be a bunch of us out there who literally and figuratively.
Can you
Quiet you. So there's going to be a lot of us out there who literally and figuratively will understand exactly where she's coming from, where they're coming from, I should say. Because again, it is amazing that inflation, everybody's saying the same keyword thing. Everything's going up but your paycheck. Everything's going up but pay. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about the profits that these corporations and companies are making. Nobody's talking about how the Pentagon is still getting budget increases. Nobody's talking about that Social Security may be adjusted, but it's not enough. And my personal favorite, nobody's talking about the fact that retirement just may not be feasible. I mean, the average salary in America can be adjusted, but if you think about, like, I use Tennessee as a prime example. The average income in Tennessee for individual for a person in Tennessee could be anywhere from $34,000 to $65,000. That's the majority. Do you know that less than 20% make above $70,000? And as you get to the 80s, the 90s, the 100,000s and up, that number drastically reduces. What if I told you that less than 10% of Tennessee has a salary above 100K? Less than 10. That screams volumes. And again, the question isn't being asked what more is being done. Everything's going up, but yet when it comes to pay, prices can go up. Corporations and companies, grocery stores, gas stations, electronics, things of that nature. People have to find more and more ways to stretch the same dollar that they're making. And at the same time, companies keep making record profits in a recession type, pandemic ran economical environment. How? Because again, it's like you keep milking a dead horse. And well, actually, that's a bad analogy. You keep milking a dead cow. You keep milking a dried cow. The only thing that's going to happen is eventually you're going to get kicked in the teeth or worse. But the problem is no one's discussing it. Even more so retirement. Baby boomers these days, most 60 plus and up, are having a hard time staying retired because their 401ks, everything they built up as a nest egg after years of working hard, after years of sweat and labor, that you had to find yourselves re-entering the workforce because, again, your retirement fund isn't going to make it because your retirement fund wasn't built for inflation. It wasn't. No retirement funds out there built for inflation. So it's amazing to me that as much as we know what the problem is, and I said this all the time, pay people. I always say, I mean, historically, and I've yet to be proven wrong on this, do you not know, for the simple fact of the matter, that historically, when Americans make more money, they spend more. When they spend more, the economy does better. That's how we've gotten out of recessions before. And yet, minimum wage is still $7.29 an hour. Companies out here, for the most part, are offering $10 to $14 an hour jobs. You know, most jobs aren't paying enough to basically live in a one-bedroom apartment in the U.S. We know the problem, and yet the solution is simple. And I asked Congress, and if I had the chance to ask Congress, specifically President Biden himself, I'd ask it. Why is it so hard to get American people the same help that banks, CEOs, corporations, and other rich people are able to get from Congress easily? But yet, when you want our votes, we have your full attention. Just saying. But there's also another story that we have, unfortunately, of another traffic routine, another traffic stop in which I don't get law enforcement sometimes, because if you know the law where you're at, then expect us to know the law. Because I keep saying this all the time, when you guys are dealing with law enforcement in the city and your state, learn the laws. Why? Number one, officers are expecting you to be ignorant. Some officers are expecting to be intimidating, flash their badge, use their voice, show whatever intimidation they can to get you to comply. Now, if you're in a show me state, which means you have to show your identification, of course, show your ID. There's nothing about it. But what if you're in a state that doesn't require that? And yet, as you point this out to the officers, they choose to be, well, officers who shouldn't be on the job. Unfortunately, it happened with this black woman.
Please stop. Can y'all stop? Okay. Like, what are you doing? You got our seatbelt? Please stop. Stop. Please let go of me. Stop resisting. Please, I'm not you got me. Yeah, you are. You got me. Okay, all right. What are you doing? Ma'am, okay, don't drag me out. Then get out of the car. I will if you will release my arm. Get out of the car. If you will release my arm, I will. If you will release my arm, I will. Because you're grabbing my arm very tightly. Okay. You're grabbing my arm very tightly. Let me go. Okay. And I'll step back. Don't start. Okay. Okay, it sure is. Okay. And you're not getting it because I know I haven't did anything wrong. Okay. How many times have I asked you? Please let go of me. Stop. What are you doing? Right. Let go of me. Let go of me. Let go.
And it pretty much cuts off there. So, what really happened with that story? That was actually in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where a 22-year-old black woman was said that officers assaulted her and handcuffed her literally last September. She was working for a property manager at the time and was taking pictures of the property that she was assigned to take a look at. That recently got a citation from the city about illegally dumping furniture and trash to the site, so she was taking pictures just for her boss. Basically, officers saw her, and one officer asked her to provide identification. She declined. Again, as she said, North Carolina is not a stop and identify state, meaning that she was not legally obligated to provide her ID if she has not committed or been suspected of a crime. This is why I keep telling you guys, unless the officer detains you, you don't have to give up spit. But I also sit there and say that you do need to learn the laws in your land. Learn the laws in your city and town. That's why whenever I'm talking to an officer and they try to do this mess with me, fishing for information, trying to get me to say things or trying to get me to justify the reason why they had no reason to stop me at all, I always say, officer, am I being detained? Am I? Because I want him to do it. Because officers, you have to tell you, yes, you are being detained. Now, if you are being detained at that point, you do have to comply. You do have to give your ID. They have to, go through their process. After they say yes, you're like, okay, go ahead and, run your procedure. If they say no, you're not being detained, we're just having a conversation, you can leave. I've done that many a times. When I said, officer, am I being detained? No, you're not being detained. Okay, cool. Peace be with you. I've had officers there and say, yes, you're being detained. And I say, okay, cool. Get my wallet out, have my ID and stuff ready, go through all the rigmarole. And when they find out that you just fit the description, cool. Well, I want some badge numbers and I want your superior officer. I will go that route. But in this case with her, that again, North Carolina is not a stop and identify state. She did not have to do anything because she wasn't detained. And again, the whole thing about it is she kept on saying, I don't have to give you my ID. Now, of course, at the time of the video where it was recording, basically that was from her side. And officers always try to imply force. See, this is why I sit there and say, when it comes to officers, officers really and truly need to understand. Number one, just because you have a gun and a badge and backup doesn't mean you can sit there and just intimidate people. That tells me that's lazy police work. Number two, officers could de-escalate the entire situation. They could have sat there and said, okay, well, we're getting reports out here of such and such. That's the reason we're out here. You know, if you could just, if you could just please give us your name, we'll detain you, but, you're being detained. You can remain in your car, but we do require ID. Explain. In my profession, what I do for a living, I have to explain. I explain thoroughly so the other person gets it. I explain thoroughly to de-escalate situations. I explain thoroughly so everybody's on the same page. Some officers out there could learn to do that, because yes, that woman is thinking about pressing charges, as she should, because it comes to find out that the officers really did not, at the current point of this podcast, which that is an ongoing story, the officers have yet to give a comment. Gee, I wonder why, concerning the fact of how quickly it escalated. Simply put, because officers believe that everybody should comply, when it should be the officers themselves who should be complying to actually doing proper procedure and actually doing their job. But hey, it's the reason why I keep saying law enforcement, that you train so much longer to be a hairstylist or a plumber or a contractor or electrician or any type of trade job, or you train longer to be a psychiatrist. You train longer to be a classically trained violinist or pianist. The fact that you have to train so much longer than an officer of the law screams the way that police reform should be handled in our freaking country. At the same time, learn humility and de-escalation tactics. It'll go a long freaking way. That's all I'm saying. But speaking of things that don't make no sense, I'd never thought I'd say this, that there is a story about the progressive Democrats who decided to backtrack after, and I wish I could make this up, that they retract the letter to Biden saying about pursuing direct negotiations with Russia in their ongoing invasion of Ukraine. House progressives, I cannot stress this enough. That, of course, those people being seen there, as of yesterday, Tuesday, sent a letter urging him down. Keep in mind, this is on Tuesday. So on Tuesday, House progressives did urge President Biden via a letter to negotiate with Russia to end the war in Ukraine. However, the Progressive Caucus chair, as you can see right there, Pramila Jayapal, says that the letter was drafted several months ago, but unfortunately was released by staff without vetting. Really? That's the excuse you're going to go with? That, again, how that could be seen, that for simple fact of the matter is, Russia, by all intents and purposes, is invading Ukraine. Putin is trying his best to invade Ukraine, as messed up as that situation is. And at the same time, Democrats, specifically progressive Democrats, are telling Biden to negotiate with Russia to end the war in Ukraine. Does anybody see the problem with that situation and why they're backtracking now? Because why do we need to negotiate? Russia invaded a smaller country in order to sit there and, as Putin would say, claiming previous land ties. That alone is a red flag. At the same time, asking President Biden to negotiate. Don't we have something about we don't negotiate with terrorists? Is that not being said anymore? I could have sworn, because wasn't Bush 2.0? We don't negotiate with terrorists. I could have sworn Bush 2.0 said something close to that. But it's like, of all things, Democrats, and usually I used to say stupid ideas usually come from conservatives, but I guess even Democrats can have a slow day. But why do we need to negotiate? That's the thing about Russia. Russia knows that, number one, it's the number two producer of oil in the world. Scratch it, number three. Because USA is number one, Saudi Arabia is number two, Russia's number three. But the fact that Russia does cover a lot of the EU, and that they're producing oil for the EU. But at the same time, what other reason does the U.S. have to negotiate? If anything, they should be helping Ukraine get their NATO status. So that means once that goes into effect, Russia's going to have to contend with more than just one nation. It's got to contend with several. Because if Ukraine did get accepted into the United Nations, that means that they can request military aid from these countries. And that might look a little bit differently on Putin's face when he's not just dealing with the U.S. and Ukraine, but 11 to 18 different other countries. Still being that they may or may not, but it's a lot hard to fight. It's a lot harder to fight 18 countries versus 2. That's all I'm saying. But again, it makes no sense to negotiate with Russia when Russia's the one doing the bullying. That's like saying, I'm going to go to the person that's beating me up and negotiate something to where it doesn't happen anymore. No, because they can take your money and still beat you up. That's the whole point. But the last story, but 2 more stories, guys, before we get to our feel good segment. I did want to cover this as well because, unfortunately, Biden's student loan plan currently right now is on hold. Somehow, some way, these Republicans got a judge to throw an injunction on this because of several lawsuits that are being led by conservative heavy states, which basically are saying that the president does not have the ability to forgive student loans. This is just so far 6 states have joined this, and the 8th this is a long word to say, and apparently it's tongue challenging. The 8th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals is where the judge is from that actually put this injunction in. Right now, it is temporary, but yes, I cannot figure out why, for the life of me, conservatives have a problem with this. Conservatives didn't have a problem, in my opinion, with giving billions in bailouts to Wall Street multiple times, to the automotive industry, to banking, to corporations. I do not understand it. They turned a blind eye to every other entity out there that had the means, money, and more opportunities to get to raise capital. But yet, when it comes to your average everyday citizen who has student loan debt that may prevent them from buying a car, getting a house, getting a job, because jobs look at credit checks too, that even though $10,000 and $20,000 may be a drop in the bucket for some, especially if your student loan debt is $70,000 and up, $100,000, actually $100,000 plus if you're in the medical field, but for that $10,000 to $20,000, it can be relieved to somebody, and for some odd reason, Republicans hate it. Now, I could say because of private banks they're fighting for, because private banks realize that they can lose billions of dollars on interest payments from those student loans. But I say it all the time. It is amazing to me that banks can turn around. Oh, excuse me. That banks can turn around and give $60,000, $70,000 to an 18-year-old, but yet still turn around after the 18-year-old has been through college and say, I want my money back plus interest. But the jobs aren't there. The job market is not there. The pay is definitely not there. But imagine being stuck with a student loan that you yourself will not get rid of in about the same time that it takes to pay off a 10-year mortgage or more. You could probably pay off a 10-year mortgage or 20-year mortgage faster than you could pay off student loan debt. Why? Because those loans were designed to keep the borrower paying. Those loans were not designed to get you to college. Those loans were designed to keep the borrower paying. As long as the borrower is paying, then the recipient will always have a consistent cash flow. And like I said, it's almost the reason why you see more apartments than homes now, because what's more profitable? Having a whole bunch of renters who have no choice but to rent, which means consistent income every month, or to have homeowners who will put down a down payment but will work like hell to bust their ass for 10 to 20 years to pay off their house, say they own it, and then that revenue stream is gone. Again, loans, just like some places, are designed to keep you eternally paying out individuals. That's the problem. But we'll follow that story as it comes along. And like I said, it's a temporary injunction. It may or not be removed, but we'll follow that story as it comes along. And also, speaking of business, though, Kanye West, I know I don't like talking about the city either, but it is amazing to me that Kanye West is a warning story about business practices 101. Free speech does not mean absolution is covered.
Tonight, Kanye West's fashion empire crumbling. Sports giant Adidas severing ties with Ye. The termination comes after mounting pressure since Ye's tirade of anti-Semitic remarks in interviews and on social media.
I could say anti-Semitic things and Adidas can't drop me. Now what? Now what?
His ongoing comments sparked immense public backlash, with Twitter and Instagram suspending his accounts and prominent Jewish organizations condemning his statements. After an anti-Semitic hate group hung a banner over a Los Angeles freeway saying Kanye is right, the pressure grew. An Adidas employee even calling out the company after weeks of inaction, with Director of Trade Marketing Sarah Kamai writing on Monday, "It's been 14 days since Kanye started spewing anti-Semitic rhetoric, and Adidas has remained quiet, both internally to employees as well as externally to our customers." Adidas addressing the termination and business impact, releasing this statement early Tuesday morning, saying Ye's comments have been, quote, unacceptable, hateful, and dangerous, adding, after a thorough review, the company has taken the decision to terminate the partnership with Ye immediately and production of Yeezy branded products and stop all payments to Ye and his companies. The company also saying the termination could cost them $250 million just this year.
You can see the stock's reaction down 4.1%.
It ends a lucrative, nearly decade-long partnership, with Forbes saying the bombastic artist may no longer be able to call himself a billionaire. Clothing brand Gap will also immediately end production and sale of Yeezy branded products, making the breakup official after Ye pulled out of the partnership last month. And it's not just stores pulling his products off shelves. Many people going to websites like YeezyGap.com only to find it redirecting to Gap's main page. And it's the exact same story with Adidas. Balenciaga also cutting ties, and talent agency CAA also will no longer represent him. It all comes on the heels of a string of controversial comments and actions from Ye. At Paris Fashion Week, he debuted a line of T-shirts with the words "White Lives Matter" boldly printed across the back. He explained that decision to Tucker Carlson.
Why I wrote "White Lives Matter" on a shirt is because they do.
After the interview, he tweeted that he was going to go, quote, DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. Ye then doubled down on Drink Champs podcast.
This is my exact point that I'm making. Like, Jewish people have owned the Black voice.
And dug deeper in an interview with Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Are you sorry you said that?
No.
I think it matters. You should be.
Absolutely not.
So how are people feeling about his music and wearing Yeezys after all of this?
Kanye made Adidas what it is. They came a long way. I just got some sneakers from here, and it's inspired by him completely.
I don't think I would support him financially, but listening to his song on YouTube that's like a repost or something like that, I think the dude still makes good music, but I think the culture that he fosters, socially it's not acceptable.
He's an artist, and sometimes I just wish he kept his mouth closed about certain things.
All right, Stephen Romo joins us now. Stephen.
Oh, that's the understatement of the year. Keep your mouth shut about some things. No, Kanye is literally the best example of a business case that you will ever get. It kills me how people think. Let's just step away from the business side for a second. It never ceases to amaze me about free speech. For all those that understand, you do know that you are never prosecuted by what you say. You can say whatever you want. There will be no government agents at your door. There will be, to a reason. Let me cap that. To a reasonable extent, you are allowed to say anything that you want to say without persecution. That's right. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, it's all the above. There is a reason why in the world you can do that. Now, that being said, however, you can say anything that you want to say, but at the same time, you're not absolved of it. Meaning that if you turn around and say something like insulting a certain ethnic group, and then certain ethnic group responds in a way to where it may hurt your pockets, my friend, your freedom of speech is not being hindered. You're learning a business case 101 lesson. That's the reason why a lot of businesses don't take positions. A lot of businesses, for the most part, remain neutral. There's a reason for that. Why? Because think about Black Lives Matter. Remember when Nike a long time ago made Colin Kaepernick the face of the company for a little while, stand for something if it means he lose everything? Do you remember how many people of the Mayo were burning jerseys, burning Nike stuff, burning Nike jerseys, Nike shoes, anything Nike? I can't support that. I can't support a company that supports a quarterback who kneels and disrespects the American flag. Those very same people are buying still Nikes to this day. Their burning symbolizes meaning nothing. Nike didn't lose money. Quite matter of fact, like Nike actually gained money, especially from the sellouts, especially from the selling out of Kaepernick's jerseys, likenesses, and things of that nature. Business model 101. When you take a stand, for most businesses, when they take a stand, it's to make sure that they keep profit. Has nothing to do with morals, keeping profit. What Kanye did was decided that he wanted to speak his opinion and at the same time decided, oh, well, I'm going to speak my opinion and then some. And if I was Kanye's publicist, business partners, or any of the above associated with him and his brand, I'm very concerned. Matter of fact, I'm probably writing on my resume for my next job, but I'm concerned. Why? Because when you take shots, and I'm going to get very literal for a second, I actually might lose some people on this. When you take shots and say that a certain ethnic group is silencing you, you're going to put yourself under a microscope. Kanye is no stranger to that. For years, he has put himself under the microscope, into the spotlight. But now saying that Jewish individuals are blocking his voice and wondering why companies are now looking at him and going, you're nuclear, you're toxic. We can't be associated with you because if we're associated with you in the public eye perception, that means we're associated with you, which means that's going to hurt our bottom line. So we're going to cut ties with you. Not just Gap, not just Adidas, who Kanye literally insulted by saying, I can say anti-Semitic comments and Adidas won't cut me. Adidas was like, bet, no problem. Well, losing Kanye is going to lose. Losing Kanye, Adidas bound to lose $250 million this quarter. Adidas value as a company is well over $3 billion. $250 million lost in one single quarter. They'll gain double that back in the next one. A footnote in the losses and gains of money with billion-dollar corporations. Balenciaga, luxury high fashion line. They lose nothing from Kanye. Gap was still considered high fashion. Still high fashion, still producing, will not lose sleep over the fact they're not making Kanye products anymore. But you know who loses out of all this? As companies left and right are dropping him? Kanye. Business case 101. Do never burn bridges associated with ethnic groups. That's why businesses remain neutral. They're Switzerland as far as most places are concerned. So the simple fact of the matter is just that Kanye is going to double down on this. And again, and then you got some people out there, it's like, well, he talked about black people and nothing happened to him. Well, there's a reason for that. Not because of the fact that black people are standing with him, because last time I checked, the only two black people are standing with him is Candace Owens and Jason Whitlock. Two black people who want to be white so bad, they're just waiting for the bleaching process to be perfected. The point I'm making out of all this is the reason why it doesn't have the same effect for black people as it does the Jewish community right now, who's still reeling from the fact of what he said, is because the Jewish people, for a lot of these people, they're in certain positions of business, of finance, of just power in itself in a financial sector. I hate to say this, but for every one black person, there's about 15 Jewish people. Def Jam needed a financier. Most record labels have a certain financier. Most banks have a certain most banks are being led by a certain CEO. Most companies out there, Gap, Balenciaga, Adidas, are being led by a certain CEO. The problem with the black community, and one day on my Offense podcast, I will talk about it. But when we hold that type of power in the financial sector, then you will see the impact we have when someone talks bad about us. Because I really hate to break this, but as black people, we have the greatest spending power in the United States. No other ethnic group compares to our spending power. But when it comes to our financial base, we are woefully found wanting compared to others. But we'll cover that subject honestly on Off Limits podcast because it's definitely going to get to that. But we're going to move on to our feel good segment because usually on How the Frack Got Here, we cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom, sometimes being due to faith in humanity. But hey, it's hump day, which means tomorrow's Friday, which is Thursday, and we want to leave you guys out some good vibes. And I always try to find stories that inspire, to make us, to really push us, to help us find motivation. And this guy right here, every time I see individuals like this individual I'm about to show, that just lets me know that I need to keep pushing, because if they're not finding no excuses, then I shouldn't either.
Sport that begins quite literally with love. We introduce you to a teen who is serving as an inspiration.
16-year-old Clay Watson is a force on the tennis court, and his serve is especially impressive. Born without a left forearm and hand, that does not stop him from unleashing a powerful serve.
I grew up with this limitation, which that's what it's called, but I don't really see it as a limitation.
As a young boy, he found ways to play basketball, baseball, and golf. But it wasn't until the 7th grade that he decided to try tennis.
I was like, hey, Mom, I want to play. I want to try out for the tennis team. She's like, okay.
I said, okay, have fun. Good luck.
Do we even have a tennis racket? And I was like, oh, yeah, we have an old one out there.
So that's what he used. And he came back home every day from tennis tryouts saying, well, I made the cut.
Learning to serve with one arm or one hand was definitely difficult, but it honestly came very easy to me and pretty quickly. I really just tried different things, different tosses.
Now Clay is paying it forward, teaching tennis to 6-year-old Aubrey, who was born the same way.
She didn't think she could play, and then she saw me, and she was like, oh, well, if he can do it, then I can do it.
Clay hopes to inspire others as he lives his own life by this motto.
There's always a way to figure those simple or difficult tasks out.
In the one.
And I thought that was pretty cool that man right there figured out how to make it work. Playing tennis with one arm, that's impressive as all get out. But again, tells me off the bat that I got no excuse, especially with the things that I want to do and the dreams I have. But again, just thought it was cool, inspiring young man. But that's going to do it for our podcast, guys. Before I do get out of here, I do want to say thank you for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate it. Before I do get out of here, some shameless plugging as usual. I do want to shout out to my buddy Vaughn at Big BZA Dot on all socials. Definitely check him out. As he usually does TikToks, and he is back to his beat making, so definitely check him out there. Of course, guys, on all socials, you can find me, BlackFox447. Like and follow me there, as I usually post a lot of things that I watch and play, especially gym stuff, because I do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, again, I am all about the unity, and I'm all about communication, networking, really building up that base that I just got to be talking about, especially when it comes to Black people. We really need to do that. We really need to build up. It is 2022 and we're still acting like it's 1978. We do need to be better. If we do better, if we know better, then you'll do better. That is my entire wish. If I could have one honest wish, well, my one honest wish for mankind, that would probably be it, because I got a lot more wishes, but that goes a whole nother subject. That being said, guys, the tracker at the bottom, let me make that just a little bit bigger. If you copy and paste this into your browser, we'll take you to our link tree that has the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of my podcasts. How the Frack got here, get bit, and of course, the Offense Podcast. Definitely like and share and follow as we try to keep these things updated with news and topics depending on the show. But again, definitely check out the YouTube and Facebook groups as we're trying to grow them from there. That being said, guys, the last thing I'll say is, again, if you're going to be out and about, please, especially in high traffic areas, please wear a mask, protect yourself. Coronavirus and its many variants and Decepticons are still out there. Please, oh please, oh please, protect yourself. If you feel the least bit sick, please stay home, because the only way we're going to get past this pandemic is to literally and figuratively protect ourselves. That is the only way we can do that. So, the last thing I'll say about How the Frack got here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply trying to give you all the information to allow you to make up your own mind for yourself, but we're providing a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better in society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first black. Wow, that was such a terrible outro. Electing our first black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first black 4-star military general in the armed forces. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up with your paycheck? Why do we have the same politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. We will all get through.